Welcome everyone to how to freeze food for tasty results. As you arrive, if you put in the chat your name, where you live, the city and state, and then an item that you recently froze for later use. Lisa, do you have something to share? What have people froze lately?
I don't have anything so far.
Okay, well, feel free to do that and think about that. We'll be using the chat box throughout. If you're not familiar with Zoom, you can scroll down at the bottom of your screen and it should pop up, click chat, and you'll be able to type. Feel free to share what's working for you too, as far as freezing food and food preservation. So this is a series of 7 that food preservation series that I'll be doing this summer and early this fall. And just a few housekeeping items that you're all on mute, and we'll use the chat box for questions. And if you're having any technical issues, Lisa can help troubleshoot that. And then this webinar is being recorded. So this is me and my garden. My name is Suzanne Driessen, and I'm an extension educator with the University of Minnesota Extension. And I've been with Extension for 23 years already. But I'm an avid food preserver, and I've been preserving food since, let's see, I was 8 years old. I don't know, maybe younger than that. I don't know. I grew up on a farm in southwest Minnesota near Canby, Minnesota, and in a family of 13. We lived on a farm, and we had a huge garden. So if we grew it, we probably preserved it. Sometimes in the summer, I felt like I was working on a small food processing factory, we preserved everything, as I mentioned. But today I have a garden, and I do preserve my harvest. My favorites are freezing and drying tomatoes and canning pickled dilly beans. There's me in my garden. So today we're going to focus on preserving by freezing. So we'll talk about how freezing preserves food. We'll take a look at some food safety and quality considerations so your product is safe and also very tasty. We'll look at foods that don't freeze well and why that is and what happens if you do freeze those food. Freezing fresh fruits and vegetables are very popular and easy to do, so we'll take a look at the best ways to do that. And we'll take a look at freezer containers. There's a variety on the market which are best for what you're freezing. We'll take a look at methods of pack. So if you're not familiar with food preservation, you're going to learn some food preservation terminology today. We'll also take a look at how long you can keep things in the freezer and how to do that safely at what temperature. And then we'll look at how to thaw that safely when you're ready to use it. And then we'll take a look at some freezer care and maintenance so that your freezer is efficient and effective. And then we'll end the morning with resources that you can do a deeper dive and find resources to freeze what you want to freeze. So why freeze food? Well, freezing actually yields the highest quality product. Flavor, texture, and nutritional value of any other food preservation method. And the nice thing that it's easy and quick, convenient, it's the least time consuming as well. How freezing preserves food is that it actually at those very cold temperatures will stop the microorganisms from growing. So your yeast, molds, bacteria, it'll stop that so they won't grow. It doesn't kill it, and we'll talk more about the importance of thawing. And it'll help extend the shelf life. So from a few days in the refrigerator, if you put it in the freezer, you can extend that to even up to a year, months or years. So there's certain foods that aren't suitable for freezing, and they'll yield a poor quality product. I mean, you can freeze just about anything that you want to give a try, but it may not taste the way you were hoping it would. And some of those are your cooked macaroni, spaghetti, and rice. They'll become mushy and have a warm over flavor. Cooked egg whites, meringues will get tough and rubbery, soft, sometimes spongy. Your milk-based sauces will curdle or separate. So anything with sour cream, yogurt, mayo-based foods will separate when you do thaw them. If you use a Miracle Whip type salad dressing, that tends to hold better together better when thawed. And some spices will actually change in the freezer. So it's best if you actually, lightly season things or add the spices when you're ready to eat that product. Some examples are ground pepper, cloves, garlic, green pepper, and imitation vanilla. And then some herbs actually will develop stronger flavors. Curry will develop a musty flavor, and salt will actually lose flavor during the freezing process. And if it's on anything that has a fat, like meat, for example, it can actually increase that oxidation process and cause some off flavors too. So in order to reduce foodborne illness associated with home food preservation, it's important to keep basic food safety practices in mind. So the first thing we always say when it comes to food preservation is that it's science, not an art. The art is the pretty things that you end up pulling out of your freezer or pulling out of your canning cupboard. But you always want to start with research-based recipes. You can start by looking on our University of Minnesota Extension website, or the National Center for Home Food Preservation is also a good resource. And I'll give you some more resources later on. And then you want to make sure that you use quality, clean produce. Anything that's bruised, and remember that one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch. And we'll look at that a little in detail later when we talk about fruits and vegetables. And then making sure everything's clean. Wash your hands often, wear clean clothes or aprons so you're not adding any bacteria to the item that you're preserving. And then when it comes to clean, make sure that you clean and sanitize equipment and sinks. So if you're washing your produce in a sink, that it's clean as well, and that you're using the right equipment for the job that you're doing. So let's review how to freeze fruits and vegetables for best and tasty results. So what happens when you freeze fruit or vegetables, it actually freezes the walls of the surface of the produce, and it then will rupture. So that's what changes the texture from, it's going to be softer than it was before it went in the freezer, when it was fresh. So you're actually freezing the water that are in those plant cells, and as you know, fruits and vegetables have a lot of water in them. But you'll notice that that change in that texture or softness is less pronounced in high starch vegetables like peas, corn, lima beans, and cooked food products. So freezing or any food preservation method does not improve quality. So it's junk in, junk out, basically. So making sure that you're using fresh, ripe fruit and young, tender vegetables that are free of disease or injury. Immature or overripe produce will yield a poor quality product. Less than perfect produce, though, you can take that and put it in a cooked item and then freeze that item, like those overripe bananas, for example. Turn them into banana bread and then freeze that banana bread. And when you're preparing foods for the freezer, make sure that you work in small amounts. And this is to prevent any quality or nutrient loss. So try to get that in there as quickly as possible. Within 30 minutes is a good rule of thumb. So work in small batches, about 2 to 3 quarts of food at a time. Get that in the freezer and then if you have more, finish it up. Then rinse all vegetables and fruit under running water before peeling, pitting, cutting, or slicing. You want to scrub firm skinned produce like apples or carrots with a clean produce brush. Really clean those really well. And then any bushy type like broccoli, pull that apart, get into all those cracks and crevices, wash all surfaces really well. And then rinse the produce, and then you want to drain in a colander. And then you actually want to, for freezing, you want to dry that produce. So either with paper towels, or I like to use a clean bath towel and to get rid of any extra moisture, because this will help prevent the formation of ice crystals that can happen during the freezing process. And those ice crystals will actually dry out your product. And then after you have dried that product, then you prep it according to your recipe. And it's important to pre-treat light colored fruit to prevent darkening or oxidation. And that darkening will actually cause flavor loss in your fruit. So fruits like peaches, apples, pears, and apricots, they'll darken really quickly when exposed to air. So if you add something to prevent that, you'll prevent the darkening and also the flavor loss as well too. Then the recipe will indicate if an anti-darkening agent is needed and how to use that. Ascorbic acid or vitamin C is the preferred way to prevent that discoloration of fruit. It preserves the natural color and flavor of the fruit, and it also will add vitamin C. There's many ascorbic acid mixtures on the market today. They're readily available. Just follow the package directions for use for freezing. Salt and vinegar solutions are no longer recommended to prevent browning. These solutions will work initially, but over time, they will become gray in the freezer. So if you've tried that, and you might have noticed that. Lemon juice will prevent fruit from darkening for up to 3 months in the freezer. But if you're going to store anything longer, the ascorbic acid mixture or ascorbic acid vitamin C alone is the way to go. So if you would please, in the chat, if you could share with us what's your favorite fruit to freeze.
Looks like we've got raspberries, blueberries, watermelon and blueberries. Someone mentioned they don't freeze fruit because they're concerned the freezer will ruin it. Strawberries and overripe bananas. Although she says she hasn't had enough raspberries from our bushes yet to freeze. Cindy says she hasn't frozen any fruit yet, but would like to freeze raspberries. Another says blueberries.
Excellent. Yum. They're all a great fruit to freeze. Again, you can just about freeze any type of fruit. So excellent. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, so we'll move on to blanching vegetables and freezing vegetables. So the big thing, and we thank you for those of you that shared questions when you registered. That was very helpful, and there were a lot of questions about blanching vegetables. So we'll go through the process, and then I'm going to answer some specific questions that came up. But so what happens is when your fruit and vegetables ripen, there's enzymes that naturally occur, and they help the fruits and vegetables ripen and mature. But this ripening process will actually continue after harvest. So if you don't stop this process before freezing, then the vegetables will brown, they'll develop off flavors and become soft, mushy, and tough. So blanching will help that so that they're a good quality. So enzymes are, inactivated again by that blanching process, by that heat, and that term we call blanching. You can blanch either in boiling water or steam for a short time. Each vegetable will have its own blanching time, and though that blanching time is really critical, and again, it varies depending on the type of vegetable and the size. Under blanching will actually stimulate the activity of that enzymes and is worse than no blanching at all. And over blanching will actually cause loss of flavor, color, and vitamins and minerals. For blanching times, we do have a handout, and Lisa, you did add that in the chat, right? People can download that handout called Blanching Vegetables. So that's something that you can reference for the specific vegetable that you want to blanch. The other benefit of blanching vegetables before you freeze them is it'll clean them, brighten the color, and again, help delay the loss of vitamins. So we'll review how to water blanch vegetables. So to water blanch vegetables, you're going to use 1 gallon of water to 1 pound of vegetables, or for leafy greens, you're going to use 2 gallons of water per pound of leafy greens. So you'll bring a large kettle to boil, and then you're going to put the vegetables directly into the kettle, or there's a blancher, wire basket, or sometimes I use my colander, whatever works for you with the kettle that you're using. And then you'll lower that into the boiling water. You're going to cover, and then you're going to start your blanching time when the water returns to a boil. The water should return to a boil pretty quickly, within 1 minute. If it doesn't, there's a reason for that. You're probably using too many vegetables for the amount of boiling water that you have in there. And then you'll keep it on high for the time given in the directions for the blanching time. Now to steam blanch, you'll boil 1 to 2 inches of water in a large kettle. Then you'll place a single layer of vegetables in a steamer basket and place in the kettle. You'll cover, and with steam blanching, you'll actually start your blanching time immediately. And then you'll keep it on high for the time given in the directions. Generally, a steam blanching is about 1.5 times that of water blanching. And whether you water blanch or steam blanch, it's important to cool the vegetable immediately. And that's to stop the cooking process. So you really want to cool it in cold water, at least 60 degrees, or I prefer to use an ice water. So I'll take ice and put it in water. And the water blanching time is actually the same amount of time that you used to blanch that vegetable. So for example, if you're doing pea pods and your blanching time is 3 minutes, you would also cool in that ice water for 3 minutes. You'll need about 1 pound of ice per pound of vegetables. And then during that cooling process, it's a good idea or important to stir it so that you're actually getting distributing cooling it down equally. So that's important. And this was a question that came up. Do I have to blanch? And no, blanching is for quality, for food quality, not for food safety. But no blanching will actually shorten the shelf life of your vegetable, and will start taking on off flavors after 2 to 3 months in the freezer. So if you're going to use it within 2 to 3 months, you could skip the blanching step. But again, you might want to test that out with a smaller quantity. So here's some questions that came up, and then feel free to write your questions that you might have about freezing fruits and vegetables in the chat, and Lisa will take a look at those after I review the ones that came in when folks registered. But one was to how to freeze leafy greens like spinach, and water blanching is actually preferred versus steam blanching for greens, because when you steam blanch, they will kind of stick together and mat, and you won't get that even blanching. And so for, you'll pack like 4 cups of greens to 1 gallon of boiling water. For collard greens, you blanch for 3 minutes. Other greens, you'll blanch for 2 minutes. Spinach, that's very tender, only has a 90-second blanch time, so it's really short. If greens are not blanched properly, they will lose their fresh flavor quickly in the freezer. Avocados, someone wanted to freeze avocados. They're best frozen as a puree. Avocados whole or sliced, the quality will be very poor. And as you know, with avocados, they do darken quickly, so that adding 1/4 or 750 milligrams of ascorbic acid to each quart of puree will produce a better quality. Someone asked if you can freeze cucumbers. I found a recipe that I tried, I really liked. It was from the National Center for Home Food Preservation out of the University of Georgia, and they published it in their So Easy to Preserve book. It's called Non-Traditional Freezer Pickles, and it actually has cucumbers, onion, salt, and sugar and vinegar, and it's quite tasty, and it stores pretty well up to a year. If you're looking for that recipe, you can, I found it on the University of Illinois Extension website. If you just search sweet freezer pickles, you should be able to find it. And can I freeze corn on the cob was another question. Yes, you can. So water blanching, again, as I mentioned, it's based on the type of, the time is based on the type of vegetable, but also the size. So for corn on the cob, you're going to actually blanch if there's a small ear, so it has 1 1/4 inches or less, in diameter. The blanching time is 7 minutes. For medium ears that have a 1 1/4 to 1/2 inch round, they'll be 9 minutes, and then the big ears over the 1 1/2 inches will be, you'll blanch for 11 minutes. And then immediately cool in ice water. Now, remember earlier I said your cooling time equals your blanching time. The only exception to that rule is corn on the cob. So if you're going to freeze it on the cob, you want to make sure that you're cooling it is going to be double that. So for example, those small ears that are at 7 minutes, you're actually going to cool in that ice water for 14 minutes. Cooling time is important so that it's cooled quickly, and that will help prevent that cobby taste. Someone wants to freeze broccoli and green beans so that they don't get mushy when used. Unfortunately, snap or wax beans contain the highest amounts of enzymes that cause those texture changes. So even those commercially packaged frozen green beans may be a little tougher than you want them to be. That's just because of the bean itself. But blanching is a must if you are going to do that. People have told me they've had better luck using a vacuum sealer with green beans. Use boiling water to blanch broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. The heat will penetrate better, And also you'll have less strong flavors with those products. And then someone was thinking about tomatoes. My tomatoes are still green. I'm excited to taste a fresh tomato off of my plant. But so for tomatoes, they're going to collapse when you freeze them whole. They do make good ice packs though, if you do want to throw one in your freezer. I've done that. But if you actually want to use them and eat them, you can slice the tomatoes into 1/2 inch slices, and then put them on a cookie sheet to freeze for 2 hours. And once they're firm, then put them in freezer containers for freezer storage. Frozen sliced tomatoes are best eaten in a near frozen state. That'll give you the freshest taste. Or you can wash your tomatoes, dip them in boiling water for 30 seconds to loosen the skin, peel and core, and then freeze whole in pieces and then pack into freezer containers. And frozen tomatoes though do work best when you use them in a cooked dish. And we already answered do all vegetables need to be blanched? All right, anything else, Lisa, that's come in?
Nothing so far.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move into types of packs. In food preservation, a pack refers to how items are placed in the container before processing to yield that final desired result. So let's look at how you pack food for freezing. So a solid pack will freeze that product solid in one big mass. So what you end up doing is just packing it into the container, and it'll come out again as one thing. This pack works well for juicy products, like these are tomatoes that I have here, leafy greens, which you'll actually add ice water to the container. After you pack it, you'll put ice water to cover that. And the leftovers, I use this type of container a lot for leftover food. The dry or loose or tray pack method, different terms used there, but this is when you want to put a quantity in a package, but be able to pour it out or use it little by little. And that works well for here we're doing raspberries, or if you want it to freeze balls of cookie dough that you only wanted to use a few at a time, or slices of bread or deli meats that you're just going to take a few out at a time and not have to thaw that whole package, that whole block, like it would be with a solid pack. So in a tray pack method, what you do is you put your product, like these are raspberries, you put them on a tray and try to spread them out so they're not touching. And then you put that tray into the freezer, and you place that only long enough to have that product freeze firm without losing quality. So check it about every 30 to 60 minutes so you're not losing moisture. The longer you keep it in there without putting it in a freezer container, you're going to have some moisture loss. So then you'll, once it's frozen, which usually takes about 1 to 2 hours, depending on the quantity and the type of product that you have on that tray. But then as soon as they're firm, then that's when you want to pack it into your freezer container for freezer storage. So packing fruit, there's a lot of options you have to pack fruits for freezing. There's a sugar water syrup mixture pack called the syrup pack. You can pack in sugar, you can pack dry without anything. You can do an unsweetened pack that has pectin or juice or water, or you can use artificial sweeteners as well. Most fruits that are packed in sugar or are sugar syrup actually will have better texture and flavor. However, the use of sugar, it's a quality issue, not necessary for safety, but it will help retain color. Sugar helps with flavor and texture as well too. Unsweetened packed fruit generally yields a product without that plump texture and good color of those that are packed with sugar. So it's a preference thing though. But fruits like we saw when we heard people wanted to do raspberries, blueberries, steamed apples, gooseberries, currants, cranberries, and rhubarb, they maintain a great quality without adding extra sugar. If you're thinking about artificial sweeteners, you can add those before freezing, but just know that it will not provide that color protection that sugar does. Water or unsweetened juice packs, again, are an option for freezing fruit. However, the texture will be mushy and the color poor. Because of the liquid added, it freezes really hard and will take longer to thaw. The type of pack will be included in your resource, in your recipe. There's the ice cube pack. I had some leftover orange juice in my refrigerator, and it needed to get used up, so that I made them into ice cubes. So that's been kind of a refreshing treat, adding that to my water or even my lemonade. It's been good. So this is a great way to freeze small amounts of sauces, herbs, citrus juice, as I mentioned, or condiments. And what's nice about that is you put it in the tray. You usually add water or whatever your flavoring is to it, your liquid. Here she's doing pesto, so she's adding they're adding oil there. But you put that tray in the freezer, and once it's frozen solid, then you take the cubes and put them in freezer containers for freezer storage. Lately, since March, we've been going to the grocery store less often, and then when we do go, we buy in quantities. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about repackaging those food items for long-term or longer-term freezer storage. It's best that you do repackage fresh meat, fish, poultry, as well as bakery items like bread and cookies for freezer storage. That plastic that it comes in is really designed for room temperature or refrigerator storage, and not for those extreme cold temperatures. You can leave that food in that original packaging if you're going to use it within 2 weeks, but beyond that, you really should transfer it and move it into freezer grade packaging. Again, that's going to help prevent unwanted moisture loss and texture and flavor changes. The other thing about meat that you may buy has that thin coating on it if it's a fresh, and that's not well sealed. So that's the other thing that is a problem in the freezer. When air and moisture interact with fat, it causes oxidation and breaks down, and also really makes that food kind of undesirable to eat. When you repackage something that you bought in bulk, it's important to keep that original label. And this is an important but often forgotten step. If there's a food recall, we had a food recall earlier this summer with ground beef. So then you know if you have that product in your freezer. So what I did, I cut the label off my large package. I washed it in soapy water, and then I taped it directly to the package. You could also put it in a sandwich bag along with the receipt, or you could even snap a photo of it too. And then you'll know that you have it in your freezer. So vacuum packaging, this is a sealer that I have at home. The benefit of that vacuum packaging is that it removes all of the air. Air is our enemy in freezing. That's what causes the moisture loss and the freezer burn. So we want to remove as much air as we can when we package food for freezing. If your package, we talked about buying things in bulk or from the store, if it's already in a commercially vacuum packaged item, then you don't need to repackage that. Vacuum sealers tend to be a little expensive, and the material, the bags can be expensive as well too, but the benefit is that it will actually extend the shelf life 3 to 5 times longer. So it's really good for foods that have a shorter shelf life, and we're going to look at a chart of shelf life in the freezer, so you can extend that 3 to 5 times if you do have it in a vacuum packaging. In vacuum packaging, it's tricky for things that are liquidy. I tried to vacuum pack corn, and it didn't work out very well because the liquid wanted to suck into that sealing area, and it prevented a proper seal. So it's better for things that aren't juicy. It would work really well for things that are tray packed, as they're already frozen firm. And each vacuum machine will work differently, so making sure that you're following the directions on your unit. And the thing about air-free environments, it's a risk factor for those anaerobic pathogens that like Clostridium botulinum and Listeria monocytogenes that can be deadly. So it's always making sure that if it's vacuum packaged, that it is always under refrigeration or in the freezer. And we'll talk more about safe buying of vacuum packaged foods later. Let's move into freezer containers. Now, the goal of freezing food is to keep moisture in and air out. I think I've said that a few times already. Use containers that are designed for freezing. Again, this will help prevent loss of nutrients and moisture. It'll prevent change in color and flavor and prevent any off odors from developing. There are many types of freezer containers on the market today. We'll review some of those options. But before we do that, if you would please in the chat, what are some of the freezer containers that you like to use? What type do you like to use?
And Suzanne, there are a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know if you wanted to try and answer those now or if you wanted to wait until the end.
Yeah, maybe, sure. Go ahead, and if people are typing their question about freezer containers, yes.
Well, someone actually going back to when you were talking about the tray pack method, someone wondered if that would be good for chopped rhubarb also.
Yes, yes. Especially if you want to dump it out for a recipe, it would be perfect for that.
And then will you be covering freezing herbs at all?
Not specifically in this presentation. We do have I do have a fact sheet, not a fact sheet, an article on our extension website about how to freeze herbs. So if you search extension.umn.edu, freezing herbs, that should pop up for you.
Okay, and then just some of the answers to freezer containers, vacuum seal freezer bags, canning jars that are vacuum sealed, another freezer bags, plastic freezer storage containers, canning plastic containers, and then someone else mentioned they use freezer Ziploc bags. So
Okay, Excellent. There's a lot of variety out there, and you know, as people are preserving more, manufacturers are responding. So we're seeing, you know, new products that are coming about to help support food preservation, which is kind of fun. So here's another term for food preservation term, non-rigid containers. Well, what does that mean? It really means that it's a flexible container like a freezer bag or a wrap. And the importance of that is to, again, help things be airtight and prevent moisture loss and odors from entering during freezer storage. Good choices for the non-rigid containers or flexible containers are your polyethylene bags. Lisa, you mentioned that some people were using the zipper type bags. I like those as well too. Just a caution, when you're using those zipper bags, always go back and make sure you zipped it all the way. That's important. I've missed that a couple, like, oh, I missed that little corner. So double check that. Freezer film wraps, heavy duty aluminum foil over a thin layer of plastic film will really work well, again, to be that oxygen barrier, so air is not in contact with the food. The plastics used in these freezer wraps and bags are of different composition. So if you have a freezer bag and a sandwich bag at home, compare them and you'll feel the difference. They're of better quality, again, to prevent that moisture, hold in that moisture and keep that air out. Non-rigid containers, they work well for dry packed or those tray packed vegetables and fruits, and also for solid foods. You can use them for liquid packs as well too. And I just want to spend just a minute on freezer paper. It's kind of become our best friend at our house as we're buying meat in quantity. It's a laminated freezer paper. It's made of various combinations of paper and plastics or cellophane. And again, it works well to wrap individual pieces of meat, fish, poultry, or other odd shaped foods, like even bread it works well for. And it will provide that good airtight alternative to a plastic wrap. Its freezer wrap is not the same as wax, butcher, or parchment paper. However, it has a wax or plastic coating on one side, that's what acts as that barrier to hold that moisture in. And it's uncoated on the other side, so you can, you know, label it and date what's in that package. Most items that you will wrap, you'll wrap like a gift. And on this one here that I have, it shows you the exact directions how to do that. But after wrapping it, again, making sure that you're wrapping it tightly and securely, trying to get all the air pockets out. And then you're going to secure it tightly with freezer tape. Freezer tape is especially designed to stick at those freezing cold extreme temperatures. Other household tapes may come loose during that freezer storage, so stock up on some freezer tape. And then the other container most commonly used are the rigid containers or the solid containers. They're usually made of plastic, glass, or silicone, and they're suitable for most packs, but especially really good for those liquid packs, soups, leftover food. Rigid containers, they're strong, they're durable, they're leak proof, they're stackable, you can reuse them. Straight sides work better because they're easier to remove than things that are kind of rigid, or I'm thinking about a glass jar that has the shoulders on it. That is just harder to get things out of there when you're thawing them. Most containers, and that's why you'll see here my little snowflake, most containers that you purchase that are rigid, they'll have safety information on them on how you can use that. So a snowflake indicates that it is freezer safe. Then we'll talk a little bit about jars. Regular commercial glass jars will break easy at freezer temperatures. So like those things that, like the mayonnaise I'm thinking of, for example. But if you're using glass jars, make sure that you're choosing the ones with the wider mouth and the dual purpose jars that are made for canning and freezing, because those can withstand those extreme temperatures. And the wide mouth jar with straight sides, again, will allow for easy removal of partially thawed foods. Containers to avoid, unless you line it with a freezer type wrap or a storage bag, cardboard cartons or plastic containers for refrigerated items like yogurt, cottage cheese, and milk containers. They're not moisture or vapor resistant for that long-term home storage use. And so you're not going to get a quality product, and they're not, won't provide an airtight seal either. And in addition, these containers can crack and become brittle at those very low extreme temperatures. And it'll result, if you use those in freezer burn, which is that brownish, whitish, tough spots on the food, and that's due to moisture loss. Freezer burn is safe. I mean, you can eat a product with freezer burn, but it won't taste very good. And also not using those takeout or plastic containers as well, because they, again, aren't designed for freezer use. All right, we'll move on to packing, labeling, and freezer storage. Ooh, our time is flying, Lisa. The big thing when you are packaging something is to get as much air out as you can. Again, that air is your enemy. That's what's gonna dry out your food and cause that cause freezer burn too. So making sure that you're getting as much air out as you can. If you're doing leftovers, make sure that you cool any of those cooked dishes completely. I mentioned banana bread earlier. Make sure it's cooled completely before you freeze it, because if you put it in the freezer warm, it'll cause condensation inside your package, and that's going to, again, impact your quality of that product. So a good thing that works if you're using like this freezer type bag that's on this photo is that I do a lot of hugging. I hug my packages to get all that air out, but you can also take it and put it against a table and roll it that way. I'm going to show you another trick in a minute. But really try to get any of those air pockets or trapped air around the food. Try to get those out if you can, because that, again, that'll shorten the shelf life, affect the color, flavor, and texture of your food. See? Sure what happened there. Okay, oh, here's the trick I was talking about. So if you're going to seal several bags at once, try this trick that I use when I have a sous vide circulator and I want all the air out of there so that it actually won't float in my water. So you can seal food in airtight without a vacuum sealer by using this water immersion sealing or water displacement method. You put your food into a freezer bag, and then you slowly lower the bag into the container filled with water, and then massage out any air pockets around the food, and the water will push the air to the top of the bag until it's all the way out, and then that's when you can seal it tightly. You'll dry that bag with a clean towel before marking it and placing it in the freezer. Most food will expand as it freezes, so you want to allow headspace, which is that empty space between the top of the packed food to the rim of the container, which will fill, that empty space will fill as the food freezes. If you're using a wide top container like the one in the photo, you're going to allow 1/2 inch for pints and 1 inch for quarts. If it's a container with a narrow top, like a regular mouth glass canning jar, you'll increase that headspace to 3/4 inch for pints and 1.5 inches for quarts. Foods that do not need headspace include those loose or tray packed fruits and vegetables, pieces of meat and poultry, and breads. After packing the containers, make sure that you're sealing them tightly. You're gonna label it with the name of the food item, date, frozen, and the quantity, and any other thing you wanna put there. Made with love, for sure. And then it's important to freeze items as quickly as possible. Small instead of large ice crystals form if you freeze products quickly. Small ice crystals do not break down the cell's structure, in which causes that food to become soft and limp. So if you want to freeze things quickly and you're going to freeze a quantity like those blueberries or raspberries from your garden, set the freezer to minus 10 degrees, 24 hours before you're going to do your freezing session. And the other thing is, do not overload the freezer with unfrozen food. You want to freeze only the amount that will freeze solid within 24 hours. So that's about 2 to 3 pounds of food per cubic foot of storage space. So for a 20 cubic foot freezer, you would freeze no more than 40 to 60 pints of unfrozen food at a time. And the other trick is that you want to place your unfrozen food packages on or against or inside the surfaces of the coldest part of your freezer. And usually that's the center back wall in most freezers. And don't block any vents, and then make sure you're spacing out packages. Don't stack them until they're frozen. You want that air to circulate around them. And then during the freezing storage process, you want to make sure that you're keeping the freezer at 0 degrees. And the quality really is affected by the temperature. And for best nutritional value, color, flavor, and texture retention, you want to make sure, again, you keep that freezer at 0 degrees. Food stored for 1 year at 0 degrees or lower is a better quality than food stored at 5 months or at 5 degrees or 2 months at 10 degrees. Placing an appliance thermometer in your freezer in the warmest part, and that's usually towards the door or towards the top, depending on your unit. And read that temperature after it's been there. The thermometer's been there for 24 hours. And then if you need to adjust it, if it's above 0, adjust it and then recheck in 24 hours. And then practice the first in, first out storage method so that you're using the oldest stuff first. So when those packages are frozen solid, go ahead and organize your freezer. So store the oldest food on top or in the front for first use. You can use an inventory log or something to help track your food items in the freezer, which will really help with your menu planning too. There are some apps that can help you that you can get on your phone to track your inventory. One free app that I like is called FridgePal, and it allows you to make lists and scan the barcodes too. So if you're buying commercially frozen items. And I forgot I had added this slide. So first in, first out rotation method. Length of storage in the freezer. And again, this is for top quality, not for food safety. So you can keep something in there, you know, maybe it got stuck in there. And you know, that chicken's been in there for 3 years. You might not want to cook that up for chicken dinner, but it might be fine, you know, in a soup. But generally, fruit and vegetables for the best quality, 8 to 12 months. Deli meats, hot dogs, raw or cooked sausages, things that are higher in fat are going to have a shorter shelf life. You'll see there only 1 to 2 months. I think that's, and that's again due to that oxidation that can happen with fatty foods. But remember that shelf life will be extended if you vacuum seal these products. Lean fish like cod, perch, pollock has like a 6 months shelf life. Fatty fish will have a shorter shelf life. So salmon, tuna, they become oxidized after 2 to 3 months in the freezer. And then for frozen shellfish, 3 months is best. Uncooked roast steaks and chops and poultry, whole up parts, they'll retain their quality for up to 12 months. But when they're ground, they have a shorter shelf life of 4 months. Frozen soups and stews are best consumed within 2 to 3 months. Hard cheeses, 4 to 6 months. Soft cheeses are about 3 months. The USDA has a great app called the Food Keeper, and you can also find it on their website, but it's excellent for food storage. It includes both freezer storage, but also pantry, refrigerator, instructions, and then shelf life considerations as well. Freezer care and maintenance. So that your freezer is most efficient, try to keep it at least, keep it 3/4 full. If you pack it full, you will actually use more energy because the circulation of air, it's more challenging for that unit to consistently, and it has to work harder to keep that temperature at 0 degrees, which can affect quality if it's not at 0 degrees. You want to make sure that that door is tight and that you replace loose gaskets when needed. For manual defrost, chest type freezers, all chest type freezers will be a manual defrost. That means you have to do the work, but you want to defrost that at least once a year, or whenever you see that 1/4 inch of ice has built up on the sides. Check your owner's manual for how to defrost your freezer. For top quality food, again, we said keep it at 0 degrees. And then just wanted to, someone had asked this question, wanted me to talk a minute about frost-free versus manual defrost freezers, the benefits of each. In an upright automatic defrosting, our frost-free freezer will cost more, but it's more expensive to operate as well, but it's easier to access. And as I mentioned, all manual defrost freezers, all the chest types will be manual defrost. The manual defrost will use 40% less energy than self-defrost freezers. Frost-free freezers are use more energy as the freezer has to work harder to cool the interior of the, after the defrost cycle. So what happens is that with the auto defrost, it cycles on about 1 to 4 times a day, depending on the unit and use. And that can actually warm up the interior, but only by a few degrees. So if you do have a frost-free freezer, it's really important that, and any time I would argue, is that you're using freezer grade packaging again to compensate for those temperature fluctuations and help prevent with that quality and freezer burn off flavor issue. But just remember that every time you open your freezer, you're adding moisture from the outside into your freezer compartment. That can turn into frost, especially if it's a manual defrost. If you open your freezer often, a frost-free model might be better for you. If you want a deep freeze for long-term storage and you don't go into that freezer very often, that manual defrost freezer might be a better option. I know that I have heard that freezers were flying off the shelves during our stay-at-home orders. And then let's briefly move into, we're over time, but if you can hang on, if you can, I understand we got started a little late. We'll finish this up since we're recording this. We'll finish off with safe thawing. And what are some ways that you typically thaw frozen food? We'll let you put that in the chat, and Lisa will come back to that at the end since we're short on time. And this little graphic says it's not cool to thaw meat on the counter. So what you need to remember is that freezing will halt the growth or stop the growth of microorganisms when it's in the freezer, but it does not kill them. So that bacteria, yeast, molds, but once you bring it back into the temperature danger zone, which is between 40 degrees to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, for longer, if it's in that danger zone for longer than 4 hours, any bacteria present on that food can start to grow again. So this is really the reason why we never thaw food at room temperature, because that outside of the food will warm up enough to be a possible breeding ground for harmful bacteria. So there's 4 ways to safely thaw food after it was frozen. That's in the refrigerator, in cold water, in the microwave, or during the cooking process. The best way, but takes some planning, is in the refrigerator. And that'll keep the food out of the temperature danger zone, and it also preserves the texture and quality of that food. If you're thawing in the refrigerator, the rule of thumb is to allow 24 hours per every 5 pounds of food. Cold water, if you're in a hurry, that's another method. I use that for seafood, shrimp, works really well. You will put your package in cold water. You want to change out that water every 30 minutes. Never use warm water because you're going to warm up that food. And then when you're thawing in cold water, you'll want to cook that immediately. And when you're using the cold water method, you shouldn't, it's max out at 2 hours. Don't use that method if it's going to take more than 2 hours, because that's when you start getting into the temperature danger zone. And if you need to thaw even faster, you can defrost in the microwave. If you have a defrost cycle, that will help from preventing the cooking the food. And you'll want to, again, cook things thawed in the microwave immediately. And then a final way to thaw the food is during the cooking process. You can cook many frozen foods from their frozen state. Pre-made frozen meals, soups, lasagna, stews work well to defrost as you're reheating them. You can also use frozen foods in a sous vide circulator if you have one, or an electric pressure cooker like an Instant Pot. You will have to add more time though, so follow your directions for that. If you're using a slow cooker though, you always want your food thawed first. And just want to talk about thawing food or fish that has been vacuum packaging. It has specific special requirements because of the food safety risk associated with Clostridium botulinum that causes botulism. While the vacuum can preserve that shelf life and extend it from 3 to 6 months to a year or more, resulting in a tasty and superior product. For food safety though, it's really critical that you actually, when you're thawing that, thaw it in the refrigerator, and you should open it before you, what I do is I'll open the package and I'll put it in and transfer to another container and put that container in the refrigerator You can go ahead and put the package itself in the refrigerator, but as soon as it's thawed, you should then transfer it to another container. And again, by opening up that package, you're allowing the oxygen to be present, and that prevents the germination of the Clostridium botulinum toxin that is associated with botulism. On any of your commercially vacuum packaged fish, look for that. It should provide safe thawing directions on your package. Refreezing thawed food, you can safely refreeze frozen food that has been thawed. You have something in the refrigerator and you get a better offer, you can't cook it, you can refreeze that, whether raw or cooked. Know that it will lose some moisture and some quality because you're going through that thawing, refreezing process. But to safely refreeze, the thaw product must be kept cold, and you want to refreeze it within 3 to 4 days. Or if you can't, cook it, and then you could freeze the frozen item. And finally, we'll move into resources. Your go-to website, besides the University of Minnesota, we'll look at that in a minute, but the National Center for Home Food Preservation, again, they do the research. It's out of University of Georgia for the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. They do the food preservation resource or research. And as you'll see on the slide, that there's a how do I can, freeze, dry, cure, and smoke. So if you click on those, you'll get a variety. If you click on the freezing, you'll get a variety of publications associated with freezing fruits and vegetables, prepared products, and animal products as well. And finally, we have resources through the University of Minnesota Extension on preserving. And we also have many videos on our YouTube channel, our food safety YouTube channel through the university. And we'll be adding these recorded presentations there as well. So if you know someone that's missed it, we'll be posting those. And then we have a Twitter account at UMN Food Safety. You can also call if you're preserving something or have questions related to food safety or any household questions. You can call our answer line and you'll talk directly to an extension professional. This is staffed by Iowa State, and you'll get answers to your questions. There's Minnesota's number is listed there. And calls can be answered Monday through Friday, 9 to noon and 1 to 4. You can leave a voicemail if you're calling outside of those hours. Just to note though, only those calling from Minnesota, Iowa, or South Dakota area code can access the answer line. Iowa and South Dakota, they have their own phone number. You can also email, or they have many frequently asked questions on their website as well. Oh, and when you go to their website, you can also subscribe to their blog, which I do. It's really timely. They do a lot of food preservation tips and hints as well. And in closing, just wanted to let you know that we have some upcoming webinars. Again, this is the first of the 7 that we'll be doing. So basics of home canning in July 22nd, pickling, preserving fall vegetables in September, and then we'll take a look at fermenting. So those you can register if you go to our university extension.umn.edu. They'll be on our events page, and then also if you search for food preservation courses, they'll pop up there and you can register from there. Thank you everyone for hanging in there. I know we're 15 minutes over our time, but if you would have a chance, I'd like to know one thing you learned today and one action item you will take as a result of this webinar. I'll give you a minute to do that. And then Lisa, we'll see if we have any questions that have come in.
Someone said they'd like the info on thawing out meats. Another said freezing items in ice cube trays. Haven't thought of doing that, but we'll give it a try. Action, stop using leftover yogurt, cottage food containers, etc. for freezing things.
Great, give it a try. See if you notice a quality difference. Well, I thank everyone for their time today. I hope you learned something. Food preservation is great fun with some great results. There's just a few tricks and tips I hope I shared with you so that the frozen food you freeze is safe and tasty. Thanks for joining me today. Feel free to reach out if you have further questions by emailing or giving me a call or call the answer line. Thank you.